Karen Bernal. She is the chair of Progressive Caucus, and she's going to talk about why her group supports Palestinian rights.
Afternoon, everyone. You guys are brave for coming out here. Look, the sun's coming up, so we're doing something right. I am the chair of the Progressive Caucus of the state California Democratic Party. Now, you know, we are not supposed to talk about partisan politics while we're here. So I want to just say briefly a word or two about that and then go into my personal story and then kind of end on politics again. The Progressive Caucus has a statement of principles, and I invite everyone to read them. And if you go to www.progressivecaucuscdp.org, you'll see about us, and then we'll have a statement of principles there. In it, you'll notice that we support one common humanity for all people, irregardless of their identity, and that we support the fact that a person has a right to their home. We support, we are against displacement for any reasons, and that they have a right to return to their home, and that there can be no discrimination that's ever correct. And in this regard, we've been, the sentiment in the caucus is absolutely clear on this issue, and it's surely on the side of the Palestinian cause. Now, I want to talk about myself really quickly here because I owe my very existence to the fact that there was a war. My mother is Japanese. She survived World War II in Japan. My dad's an American GI who went over there in the 50s and married her during occupation. I grew up myself on Okinawa during the Vietnam War. And I remember distinctly as I was growing up, I lived in the early 60s. I'm in my 50s. I remember that I grew up in a neighborhood between the base, that the B-52s, which that's where they flew out of to go bomb Vietnam, Saigon, in that whole area. They flew out of Kadena Air Force Base every morning at around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, laden with bombs. And then they would come home later that night, you know, around dinner time. And it never occurred to me, you know, that this was out of the ordinary, because when you're 6 years old, you don't consider these things, you know, but it's the banality of that kind of violence. What I do remember, though, growing up in the 3 tours my dad did there was that I remember that the Americans who we went there, we took land, we formed these super bases, and we basically took over the land. We had the audacity to go there and do that and then consider the Okinawans foreigners. And the very word would be used. When you said foreigners, you did not mean yourself, you meant the indigenous people there. And this is a parallel I find very similar here. And it is shocking, you know, but and also the fact is that the culture that enables that is inherently violent. Inherently, and I haven't heard this word used today, because at the heart of what allows absolutely everything that we've talked about, from the labor, the inequities in the labor movement, and I'm a unemployed labor organizer myself right now, and in addition to the Zapatista movement, to what's going on here, is in the word racism. That's what's going on, and that's what allows for this to happen, okay? Well, as someone who grew up as a product of 2 former enemies, and seeing what's been done on behalf of our name, I feel that the reason why I came into being, I look at this philosophically, is that I'm here because there's a reason for it. I'm here to redeem. Every day that I'm alive must be an act of redemption over what I've been allowed to be alive for. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So I feel the same way for all Americans. You may not have been there, you may not have been in the Middle East or even in the Far East, but our lives have to be an act of redemption because it is unfair what we've been able to enjoy at the expense of others. You know, one of the things that my mom says to me, and she's still alive, she says this, is that as someone who survived the bombings and she sees what happens here, she saw what happened in Okinawa, she sees what's going on now, is that it is so unfair. She said, all the Americans get to vote for their president, and every 4 years they get to elect their leaders, but it is unfair to the rest of the world because they don't have a vote, and they ought to have a vote because they're so impacted by what happens in politics. And it's absolutely true. And so because they can't, we have a responsibility to do something about that. So now I want to kind of end on a note, going back full circle now. It's true, our political system is in the, can't use the language I want to use right now, but we can't just sit idly by, and it isn't, I'm not asking anyone to join the Democratic Party here. I mean, there's a reason why I'm there, and it's only because I figure that it's got to be the inside-outside push, and I have plenty of friends on the outside, and I also believe that it is in a form of political training. I'm not sure I'm going to stay there, but one thing I can say is that when we have people that we can get behind, for instance, running for Congress, I have no hope right now in this president. But there are people that are running here and there that are going to need our support. Norman Solomon, for instance, will be running for Lynn Woolsey's seat when that opens. He will be running for Congress next year. Our backyard, all progressives, our backyard goes well beyond the Sacramento borders. Our backyard is this entire country. And once we see someone that supports our cause, we need to support them. Another person, in the elections coming up Tuesday, our friend Marcy Winograd, who had the bravery to run against Jane Harman last year and got 41% of the vote. Well, guess what? That special election, because Harman suddenly vacated her seat. Maybe the FBI was catching up to her, I don't know. But that election is coming up Tuesday. If anyone wants to help on that, they can make virtual phone calls for Marcy Winograd, who is the only Jew in the race and the only one called the anti-Semite in that race. Isn't that odd? So anyways, I'm going to end on that note. At some point, you got to do politics, because if you don't, politics is going to do you. And solidarity here for everyone. And we are one. There is only one humanity. The most controversial statement that you can make is a statement that is not controversial at all, and that is that there is only one